The cost of living may have leveled off, but the cost of dying hasn't. Chances are pretty good that when you die, it's going to cost a whole lot more than you think. That's because there's a revolution going on right now in the funeral business. In fact, you might say death is a growth industry. Funeral directors attending trade shows have always been able to kick the tires on shiny new hearses or check out the latest brushed steel, pink satin, and rose accent caskets. But at the funeral conventions these days, there's an entirely new exhibitor, the Tombstone Fund of Houston, Texas. Now, what is the Tombstone Fund?
Tombstone Fund is a index fund of public companies in death care.
Death care?
Death care.
Public companies whose business is death care, funeral homes, cemeteries, caskets. Companies successful enough to produce a mutual fund that invests exclusively in their stocks. You might say they're bullish on bereavement.
The future is bright. We anticipate there's something like 2.1 million people dying now annually, and in 40 years expect to be about 4.1 million.
Millions more deaths? Great news? Only in America. It's very simple. Baby boomers are aging, they're all going to die, and there's money to be made. Seeing that profit potential, a few big corporations are snapping up thousands of mom-and-pop funeral homes all over the country. Is the pace of these larger corporations buying up small funeral homes picking up?
Yes, they are buying up as many as they possibly can.
Hi, Ann. How are you?
Pretty good. Darrell Roberts spent his career running funeral homes and cemeteries, sold out to one of those conglomerates, and then wrote a whistle-blowing book called The Profits of Death. Someone called it a feeding frenzy.
Yes, I've heard that term. It is a feeding frenzy. They're out there buying anybody and everybody they can.
These conglomerates are also buying up cemeteries, aren't they?
Yes, they are, just by the bushelful.
Just 3 big companies already handle nearly a quarter of all the funerals in the United States. The biggest, call it the Microsoft of death, is Service Corporation International, known as SCI. SCI and the others are especially active in places with large elderly populations like Florida.
Traditional services usually is 1 day of visitation.
Clarence Pravat is an independent funeral director in Pasco County, just north of Tampa.
Almost everything around me is owned by, it really amazes me, one corporation. You know, sometimes
Which
you have
one?
SCI Corporation.
What do you think SCI's strategy is?
They just want to control the death care industry.
In Pravat's area, they already do. Just across the street from him is Bell Funeral Home, purchased in 1996 by SCI. SCI also bought Family Funeral Care, Wellwood, and North Meadow Lawn, all within 10 miles. And on top of that, SCI bought both of the big cemeteries in Pravat's area. You'll have to take our word for all of this, because there's no sign anywhere, not even in small print, that says SCI. I'll bet most people who have these corporations running the local funeral home don't know it.
The majority of people do not know it. It is certainly planned by the conglomerates.
That they not know it.
That they not know it. They want the consumer to feel like they're still dealing with their local John Doe funeral director, the guy that they've known for the last 30 or 40 years, the guy they go to Rotary with, the guy they go to church with. They want that impression to stay there.
Should it really matter to most people that SCI now owns the Bell Funeral Home instead of Mr. Bell? If they care how much they spend, it should matter a lot.
Typically, as soon as the big conglomerate comes into town and they take over a facility, they will raise prices fairly quickly.
SCI has sure raised prices at Bell Funeral Home. Just look at the price list. In December 1995, just before SCI came along, the price of a standard full-service funeral, not including a casket or burial, was just over $1,600. Right after SCI bought Bell, the price jumped to nearly $1,900. A few months later, up again to nearly $2,300. 2 months later, another jump to over $2,500. That's almost $1,000 more in just 18 months. What about your prices?
Well, Leslie, I've been in business 3 years now. I'm going on my 4th year, and my service charges have gone up in the 3 years $153.
How can you do that if they're raising so much?
because I'm not as greedy as they are.
Clarence Pravat charges almost $1,000 less for the exact same service right across the street. It defies logic that you don't take away all their customers.
I'm taking away some of them.
Some of them, but
Yeah.
why aren't you taking away all of them?
Because the consumer is not aware of what's going on out there.
People don't shop around the
No,
day
they
someone
don't.
dies.
No, no.
This is a fundamental fact that sets the death care business apart from all others. Most consumers are clueless. People don't shop around. They don't comparison shop. And the conglomerates know that.
That's correct. The conglomerates want to keep the consumer in the dark as much as possible. It's not good for their business for the consumer to know.
That's an integral part of their strategy.
Yes, it is very much part of their strategy. They do not want people to know what facilities they own. They don't want people to know that they're raising the prices when they do buy the facilities. They don't want to know that it only costs $50 to dig a grave when they're charging $800 for doing that service.
That's a 1,500% markup for a service they call opening and closing a grave. It's more like two guys and a backhoe. And Robert says it really does cost the cemetery between $50 and $100. What would the old independent cemetery have charged?
They were probably charging $300 to $400 for that opening and closing fee, and the new people are charging $800, $900 for the same thing.
So the prices were being jacked up anyway.
The prices were high already, yes, and now they are going through the roof.
We just stood there kind of like with our mouth hung open because we couldn't believe it was that much money.
Kathleen Crow found out about funeral prices in Jacksonville, Florida, when she learned that her mother had only weeks to live. You went to a funeral home called Town and Country. Why did you go to that one?
They were on the way to work.
So it's convenient.
Right.
And
it was close to home.
They quoted you a price for a funeral.
That's correct.
Which was?
About $8,000.
Was that the least amount? Did they tell you
Yes,
that was the least
bottom
expensive? Did you have $8,000?
No.
If your mother had died that day, what would you have done?
We would have had to get a loan.
Kathleen didn't know it that day, but she was dealing with SCI. That $8,000 price would have included a cemetery plot and a casket.
We asked for the cheapest casket, and the one they showed us was really horrible. It was, you know, the boards, the shavings that they put together, I can't think of the name right now, and then it was covered with cloth. And that was $1,000.
$1,000? Did it look like it was worth $1,000?
Yeah. And it was just a press board. That's a press board.
And they quoted her a price of $1,000. You're laughing. How much did it actually cost the funeral?
Probably $150 to $200, depending on the manufacturer, but it was not very expensive.
$150 to $200 most, and they charge her $1,000.
That's right.
Perhaps because they know their markups are ridiculous, all funeral directors, independent and corporate, get very nervous when talk turns to casket prices. Can I ask you some questions about your caskets?
Not with that on.
At a funeral trade show in Florida, casket makers scurried to hide their wholesale price list the moment we arrived.
We're a manufacturer. We're not a retailer. We do not sell to the general public, so I'm not going to get into prices. I'll let our customers do that for us.
But his customers, including independents like Clarence Pravat, don't like talking about prices either. Well, so what's the big secret here?
Well, it's about me asking you how much money you make every year. You know, you get personal with things. And people
We finally did get hold of lots of casket price lists, wholesale and retail. Suffice it to say, independents' markups are high enough. Corporations' markups are higher. What did you say?
You didn't say much because you're in shock.
Because her mother was still alive, Kathleen Crow did what most folks can't. She walked out of that first place and went to another nearby. But guess what?
I went from one funeral home to another thinking that they were two separate companies, and they were not. They're the same.
You went to another funeral home owned by the same corporation, owned by SCI.
That's correct.
You also went to two different cemeteries, as I recall.
That's correct.
Also both owned by
The same.
SCI.
Yes.
So almost every place you went, you were bumping into the same corporation but had no idea.
That's correct. I think they're misleading by keeping the different names on each building.
When you say it's misleading, is it deceitful? Sneaky?
Sneaky.
How do you justify that other than that you're just playing games with the consumer? I don't know, Leslie.
SCI's funeral homes and cemeteries in Clarence Pravat's area near Tampa play the same game. They're all part of what the company calls a cluster, saving money by sharing staff, management, and facilities.
Well, the first thing they consolidate is facilities for embalming. When somebody passes away, they will take them all the way to Clearwater. You're talking about a good an hour, hour and 15 minutes to get to this facility.
So if somebody's mother dies in your town and they go to the Bell Funeral Home right across the street from you, do they know that their mother's going to be taken an hour and a half away?
Absolutely not.
They think it's happening right there.
Like it used to be. Now, there's probably 15 funeral homes that are doing the same thing. You've got one room that the embalming itself is being performed in. You've got another room where the dressing takes place. You have another room where the cosmetics being
It's
applied.
a factory.
Yeah.
One embalming factory, but many different prices. A customer at SCI's Family Funeral Care pays $150 for embalming. But go to Wellwood just up the street, and SCI charges you $400. You're getting charged $250 more for exactly the same thing?
Exactly.
Identical?
Identical. Same facility, same embalmer.
There's no laws against this?
Not to my knowledge.
There's no consumer protection against this?
It's business.
We wanted to ask SCI and the other death care conglomerates about their business, their prices, and their policies. They all said no to on-camera interviews. By the time Kathleen Crow's mother died this January, she had found an independent funeral director who charged her $3,700, less than half the original SCI price.
There's nothing wrong making a profit. That's what you're in business for. But when you're overly making a profit at the expense of someone's time and the need.
When people are vulnerable.
Right. And, you know, I think the best people and the toughest people will be vulnerable and pay more than what they should.
In the past 30 years, there's very little that has changed in the death care industry. The biggest change, and really the only change, is that now you have the consolidators. Consumers still are in the dark. They still do not know what decisions to make. And as long as that happens, the death care industry can do virtually anything that it wants.